College is a wild ride for young adults, and their mental health often suffers. This podcast addresses the inner battles many college students struggle with. You're listening to Normalize It Forward, where we have raw, unfiltered conversations about young people's biggest mental health problems, how to handle them, and how to achieve a more resilient mind. Time to get rid of those heavy burdens and focus more on self-love and care. Here is your host, Mark Lehman.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Normalize It Forward. My name is Mark Lehman, and I am super excited to have Emily Gordon join us today. Emily, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
Fantastic. Let me read a quick intro, Emily, and then we'll dive right in. So Emily is a licensed clinical psychologist with 25 years of experience, almost 25 years. That's what I say too, by the way, almost 25 years. Dr. Gordon maintains a private practice in Natick, Mass, where she provides therapy, supervision, consultation, and psychoeducation. She specializes in treating eating disorders and body image disturbances in adolescents, young adults, and women of all ages. Emily often works with people navigating life transitions and parents looking to better understand and support their developing teen and to better care for themselves along the way. She enjoys speaking and writing about topics relating to eating disorders and body image, adolescent development, young adulthood, and parenting. In addition to her work with teens and families, Emily is also a parent to 3 teenagers. 3 teens. All right. Well, Emily, welcome. How are you?
I am good, thanks. I'm glad to be here tonight.
Welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. First, I'm going to flip-flop and start with the last thing I just said. 3 teens. Tell me, how old are we talking?
Well, actually, 2 are young adults. I don't know if I can say teenagers anymore.
Sure. Okay.
But I don't know, teenagers, it's so much easier. And so 2 in college and 1 in high school.
Got it. So like me, you're around this personally and professionally, this age bracket that is, and very similar. Emily, you and I treat similar aged individuals, high school, middle school, high school, college age, and beyond. And would love to. Why don't we start off with tell us a little bit about your practice?
So I have an office here in Natick. I have a lot of experience treating adolescents with eating disorders. And I work with people in sort of a dynamic, relational, IFS-informed way. I integrate CBT, DBT, and just really kind of try to take a perspective of trying to understand what is going on for someone. How do they tune in to the inside and kind of tune out all of the outside? And I've increasingly been working supporting parents and kind of people navigating the mid to older life challenges, which I've really enjoyed doing that as well. So really a range of issues.
Nice. I mean, it sounds like you cover a lot of ground in your office and see a lot of different people for a lot of different things. Eating disorders is such a fascinating specialty. I have that as a subspecialty of mine as well. I think that my background as a family therapist, I was sort of drawn to it because there's such a family component to every individual that suffers from an eating disorder. I'm wondering if we could just start at kind of the basics. Can you just tell my audience a little bit about what is an eating disorder?
That's a great question. So I think eating disorders are part of what's so interesting about them is they're so complex and they impact so many different areas of life and functioning. So essentially an eating disorder is a focus on food and body and sort of a preoccupation. What truly categorizes an eating disorder is like a fear of fatness or gaining weight and an inability to maintain one's health. Or we are defining health.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think these days there's lots of talk about, what is disordered eating versus what is an eating disorder. There's a lot of people on diets. There's also noise out there about what's the right thing to do, what's the healthy thing to do, what we should be doing, what we should look like, what we shouldn't look like, right? And so there is certainly a preoccupation, I think, in our culture, but I think an eating disorder sort of marks itself as this intense preoccupation in a way that really gets in the way of, like I said, health and sort of healthy functioning.
Yeah, I think that's a really good definition. That's a challenging question I ask because it's right, but that's a good way of saying it. And I think having worked in hospital settings in the past where I've eaten with patients, that are severely impacted by eating disorders, meals take on a whole new level of intensity. and having seen patients inpatient, being tube fed and so forth. Again, I don't think people really understand how impactful an eating disorder can really get.
I think that's very well said and very important, because what we also have to know and appreciate isn't the right word, but sort of recognize is that eating disorders are incredibly serious. They are one of the highest mortality rates of all mental illnesses. And that's because, it affects your mood and also your health, like your physical body. And so it is incredibly serious. And there is, we can't really talk about eating disorders these days without talking about this sort of cultural piece. But I think when you sit with somebody, and whether you are treating them or just, a friend or a family member sitting with somebody, it's really a brain-based illness. And there's really something that sort of happens in the brain that feels really irrational sometimes. And I think that's probably what you're speaking to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. Maybe that's a nice segue to talk about, our culture, right? And sort of how that impacts things. I have a funny feeling you and I can talk about this for hours and hours and hours. I promised I'd only take a little bit of your time though. So I think that when it comes to this, social media has really had a major impact, I think, on I'll call it the competition
Yeah.
amongst people. And, what I see online, I'm on Instagram regularly for my business, TikTok for my business, and even LinkedIn to some degree. And what I see, in the social media world from young adults and what they post is just disturbing. I mean, it's and sad. And obviously, it's been a little bit since you and I have been a young adult, right? And so I think I often wonder, like, what would that be like for us? Because we didn't grow up with social media. And I think young adults have this interesting perspective is they don't know anything but social media, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I'll ask you the huge question, but
Yeah,
like,
that is a
ha-
huge question, and
yeah,
I'll try to answer that, or just sort of speak to some of the themes and
it
things that
perfectly fine. It's
that
it's a,
come
it's a
up.
it's a big one, but how do you feel like social media impacts body image?
Well, so there's the larger issue first of just sort of like social media and our culture,
Yeah.
right? And like even before we get to eating disorders, because we're also, I know your audience here is like college, young adult
Yep.
kind of population, right? And so just this culture of achievement and perfection and like having to be like success,
Mm,
right? There is just all this pressure on I mean all of us. I think
yeah.
adults and parents are stressed. I think college kids, young adults are stressed, and I think high
Mhm.
schoolers are incredibly stressed. So one thing I just want to say, I have to, like, when I go on these podcasts, we're really talking generalities, right? And I
Yeah.
understand that each individual identity or population kind of that like it's hard to come up with these generalizations, but we're going to do that anyway for purposes of this podcast. So there is this larger culture of like achievement and perfection. And then we get into social media and like appearance and looks and body image and what we call diet culture, right? Which is this, you said competition. I think also what happens is comparisons, right?
Totally.
That
Yeah.
like the competition comes from or is connected to the way in which just like biologically we compare ourselves to other people. And so there's the competitiveness. And of course, when we talk about social media, what you and I maybe first encountered with social media, however many years ago that was, I don't even know. Like the social media of today is very evolved and different because what's driving the social media these days is the algorithms.
Right.
And that has just added a whole new layer of danger, quite honestly, when it comes to all sorts of things. Because what we know is that social media platforms get paid, they make their money by keeping your eyes on their platform. They're competing with other platforms.
Mhm.
And so they really, and so how do they do that? They do that by one, making you feel bad about yourself,
Mhm.
actually. And I mean, that's the diet culture, but that's the marketing industry, that's the diet industry, that's the cosmetic industry. The like those are the forces that we're up against is these really financially deep ways that these companies have of making us feel badly about ourselves. and then pushing us more and more extreme content. And so I know we're here to talk about body image and eating disorders, but that has other risks, right? Of just in terms of like truth and facts and
Oh, huge,
politics
huge.
and sort of
Yeah.
social, right? So this feeding us of more and more extreme information keeps us on the platforms, keeps us feeling badly about ourselves, keeps us feeling like we're not okay the way we are, we need to change. And then like the magic bullet is, well, if I just looked better,
Hmm.
or if I just eat this and not that, everything will be great.
Right.
I'll feel good. I'll be happy. I'll be able to compete with that other person. And so, that's why we say, and you probably have heard this, in the eating disorder field, we say like, it's about the food, but it's not really about the food, right?
Right.
It's about something deeper in the way that people are using the behaviors around food and body to help them feel better, which is a really valid and essential piece of like, how do we feel good about who we are in this world, in this world where, it's always in front of us. There's always something more. There's always something better. There's always something coming at us. There's all these messages. We're afraid to put it down. Teenagers are afraid to put it down, right? Because they want to be connected to their friends and they're afraid if they miss out on something or they're not there and it's really, really challenging.
Yeah, it really is on so many levels. Again, I feel like we could talk about this for months, and I mean, I would also say that it's creating I have a theory that I call fast, cheap, and easy. And it's,
Mhm.
when I look at young adults, I feel like they've been groomed for fast, cheap, and easy.
They
So,
have.
like, if things aren't brought to you fast enough by Amazon, they create Amazon Prime, right? So, like, everything's fast. And so, kids that I work with, they love to eat fast food because it's fast, it's cheap, it's easy, right? They don't care if it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
They love to eat that. And but there's certain things in this world that aren't fast, cheap, or easy. And I try to point that out to kids that, most things in life that are fruitful, they take time, like school, for
Yeah.
example. School is definitely not, fast by any means for kids. And so, I think one of the loops that social media ends up teaching kids, whether it's on purpose or not, is you can do this thing, take this pill, drink this sugar, do this, do that, and you'll feel so much better. And so kids will order those things, kids will buy those things, they'll take those things, and then after the fact find out, oops, actually that's not the case. I actually just ordered an item from a business and they're trying to make product. In this world, if we really want to feel better about ourselves, it actually takes time.
It really does. It takes time, it takes depth, it takes tolerance, right? Of
Right.
sort of being able to tolerate discomfort,
Mm,
feelings,
huge.
and disappointment. And I think you're right. I think there's this sort of fast, quick, and easy mentality, which, we can't fault teenagers, I
Sure.
think, for that because that is the world in which they have grown up.
Agreed.
I remember, I don't know why this moment stands out to me, but I had like a baby, in my arm and I was pushing the button on the Keurig coffee machine.
Yeah.
And I had this moment of like, we're screwed. Kind of like if my kid thinks that like all you have to do is push a button and the coffee, like not to mention like the whole, farming industry and what it takes
Yeah.
to make a coffee bean,
Yeah.
right? But like all you do is just push a button, you get
Push
a
a
cup of
button.
coffee.
That's right.
And I think that that's sort of the world in which they grown up and it looks like everybody else is doing it and it looks like everybody else is happy and successful. And, I had a fascinating conversation this weekend with someone who was talking about their feed. And there was sort of like, and it made me really think about not only the fast, quick, and easy, but like what is real and what is not real.
Mm, mhm.
And there is this way in which I think when you spend so much time on your device or on whatever platform, it feels real.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it feels, and yet it's not real.
Yeah.
And it's also not always true.
Mhm. Mhm. Of
And yet it's very easy to think that it is.
course.
Um,
Absolutely.
So I think that's another sort of obstacle that we are up against. And, I think I've had lots of conversations with my teenagers, and it's really interesting that different ages, I think, sort of experience, it depends on how long they've been intertwined with technology that they can
Mhm.
understand some of these concepts. Like when you talk about privacy,
Mm.
about companies having your data, when
Mhm.
you talk about, where does a screen belong and where does it not belong? Like to me, the screen does not belong in the bathroom.
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
some people look at me like I have 5 heads when I say the screen. So, there's this real it really depends on how old kids are, what their experiences have been, how old they were during the pandemic, what their sort of what the family attitudes are around technology.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I would also say too that in many cases, I feel like when I talk to teens, these are like pacifiers are to babies.
Yes.
They're like self-soothers,
Yeah.
And, when you take a pacifier from a baby, it usually screams bloody murder. I think that typically will happen, when a parent takes a phone from a kid. And to me, that's a little concerning because, they've
Well,
convinced them.
it is concerning, but I think that so one of my ideas, or sort of something that I built my practice on, and I really fundamentally believe, is that I really do believe that teenagers are pretty awesome.
Mm,
And I
I
believe
do too. I do too.
which
Mhm.
is why I love doing what I'm doing and talking about
Mhm.
what I'm talking about. And I really it's fascinating to me when you give a teenager an opportunity, and I use the word teenager, but I really mean teen/young adult. Because just as to review, right, we know that teens are still developing, their brains are still developing. And we also know, one of my supervisors once framed this for me in such a beautiful way, that even though somebody is 13 years old or 15 years old, they're not 13 or 15 in every single way, right?
Right.
Somebody
Right.
who is 18 has some skills of a 9-year-old, some skills of a 12-year-old, and some skills of a 25-year-old. And so we're really talking about this wide range of skills and abilities. But when you give teens the opportunity to reflect on what is their experience of using social media?
Mhm.
What is it like when they put their phones down?
Mhm.
What is it like if we say, okay, we're gonna go on vacation and we're gonna have a day? We went away one time and I kept saying, all right, we're gonna do a family day of no phones. We're gonna do it. And they finally looked at me, they were like, fine, do it already. Stop talking about it. And we're fine, do it.
Right. Right.
But I felt like I needed to prepare them. And so I think when you can really ask them questions about what is their experience and what do they notice and what do they think, it's pretty awesome what they can come back at you with. So I really try to encourage those kinds of conversations. And getting back to body image, what do you feel like when you open your feed? What's in there? Who are you following? What are your friends posting? We have a lot of rules in our house around what is okay and what is not okay. And I'll get a question like, is it okay if I do that? And I'll say, well, what do you think? Or what do your friends think? Or is it okay if I ask my friends and I do this? So we're just having lots of conversations that are really asking them to think and reflect.
Yeah. I mean, I think the theme of what you're saying is so important, and that is parents need to be involved. They need to be having conversations with their kids because whether it's social media or phones or both, they're so impactful,
Yep.
to kids. And I think sometimes even just picking their phone up and taking a look at their feed as to what's in there can give you a sense as to what they've been looking up,
Yeah.
and what the algorithm is sending them.
Yeah.
And that'll tell you a lot. It'll tell
Yeah.
you a lot. So let me pivot away from the topic of social media for a minute and just ask. So, Emily, when you think of self care is like I would say a buzz phrase that's been talked about a lot in our field for the last many years. What do you think of? What do you think of for self care?
Well, that's a great question. So I think self care is actually tuning in and knowing yourself. In order to do self-care, you sort of have to know. So you have to be able to identify, label your own feelings.
Hmm.
You have to be able One of the things I've been really working on this summer is kind of neurobiologically, right? Sort of our nervous systems
Mhm.
regulating ourselves, because whether we're in the world or on social media or just dealing with in conversations, we get activated. So
Absolutely.
being able to regulate our nervous systems, to identify feelings, to be able to tolerate feelings, to be able to know like what relationships are feel good and are benefiting us and what relationships are not working so great,
Mm,
to
mm,
be able to have boundaries, to be able to speak up for ourselves.
mm.
So, I mean, of course, is it nice to like go for a walk, right? Or sort of,
Sure.
have a massage? Like those things actually are important too, but it's way more deep than that.
Yeah.
I think self-care is building relationships,
Mhm.
so that you have them when you need them,
Mhm. Mhm.
and being able to make decisions about keeping yourself feeling good and sort of healthy.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I'd love for my young adults listening to really take heed to what you said. I mean, I think there's lots of ways to do what you just suggested.
Mhm.
And probably one of the most important things I heard just now is paying attention to yourself, right? And really asking that question, am I happy?
Yeah.
Because you could be lying to the rest of the world if you
Well,
want,
am I
right?
actually yeah, am I happy? But, like, in order to answer, "Am I happy?"
Mhm.
sort of actually say, like, "What does this feel like to me?"
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think sometimes, as teens are developing, they may not be able to have the words that go with a feeling or be able to and so it's, "Well, where do I feel that in my body?" Right?
Yep,
Or,
it's a good
"What
point.
am I
Yep.
feeling?" What am I not feeling? What's happening in terms of my behavior?
Mhm.
What are my goals and how am I doing at sort of meeting those goals, right? Like if my goal is to, play in a soccer game, or my goal is to do well on a math test, or my goal is to go try out for a singing competition. Like, am I taking the steps and making progress towards those things that I have identified are of value and meaning to me?
Great point. Yeah, great
But
point, great point. Yeah, what I was getting at was those teenagers that really deep down know they're not in a good place, and they're sort of walking around with a mask on. But I think your point is very important, and, I would also just point out the simplicity of, like, we all have the ability to take those steps.
yeah,
Like, it's not a matter of some kids may say, "I don't want to," or "I'm feeling a little lazy," or "I'm just not in the mood." That's fine,
right.
but we all still have the ability. We
We
all
do.
still have the ability.
We do.
So I'm curious, I'd love to put you on the spot. You
Oh
seem like
boy.
someone who would handle being put on the spot
Okay.
just fine. Thinking of doing, something new for my Instagram and would love to test it out on you, Emily. How about that?
Okay.
Can I do that? Is that good?
As
So
long as you handle the technology part, because last week I tried something new on Instagram and I failed the technology.
no tech here. I'm literally
Okay.
just reading a question. So I wanted to ask you as a question as a mom, like
Okay.
stepping out of your therapist role into your mom role. And really, I'm fascinated by having had two kids of my own go through college. I'm fascinated by what we learn as a parent, right? Like each year, there seems
Yeah.
to be like a good amount of learning.
Yeah.
So let me read. As a mom who's had kids go through college or even a couple of years of college, what's one thing you wish you knew going into their first year?
So that's a really good question. And I will just say that my kids will tell you I can never take the psychologizing out of being a mom.
Okay.
That's um
I'm
so
laughing because my kids tease me about it too. But
um so you know what? One of my friends had given me this advice and I didn't appreciate it at the time because as they're getting ready to go, you sort of feel like they're leaving forever.
yeah, right.
And the sort of advice or feedback was they come back
Hmm. Hmm.
and you're building a new relationship.
Right. Right.
And I think that has been really important to remember. And it's also a lesson that's related to something else I like to talk about, which is that change doesn't necessarily mean bad, right? It's just different.
Hmm.
But one of the things I talk a lot with the kids I work with who are going to college is that there is a loss
Mhm.
and there is a
Absolutely. Yep.
change. And I think one of the things that we do a disservice to our aspiring college students is we talk so much about, oh, these are going to be the best 4 years of your life, or, oh my gosh, aren't you excited you got into the school of your dreams? Right. And we don't really talk about what it feels like to experience disappointment,
Mm,
what it feels like when we miss home,
right.
and that
Homesick,
those
right.
things are sort of normal and okay.
Yeah.
So so that's, I think, something I wish I knew.
Yeah, yeah, I think those are really good points. As you were talking and you were talking about the transition and the loss, I think growth is
Yeah.
hard. Growth
Yeah.
is hard,
It
right?
is.
So and I for me, I also had a friend give me some advice and it
Yeah.
helped a lot. And it was, they're supposed to do this.
Yes.
As simple as that is,
Yes.
you forget that.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, like you're right, there's that loss, there's that sadness, I always tell families, like, it's harder for families in some ways because our lives are the same minus our kid.
Yes.
Their lives are, like, totally new and exciting and
Well, and
whatever.
you're sort of on this precipice, right, where you don't really know what's coming. And I
Mhm.
think with a lot of things in life, we can look back and we can say, like, "It was okay,"
Right.
right? Like, "I got through it. I made it." But when we're facing a precipice and we don't know what's coming, it can be really scary. But it's also super cool to watch kids figure things out
I
and,
agree.
like,
Totally.
become
Totally.
themselves and
Yeah.
find things, which is not to say that it's always easy or that it's always a smooth road, right? But to see them navigate and meet challenges and find
Pretty
things
cool.
and, like, people and things that are so awesome, I think is
Mhm.
cool.
I have one more question.
Okay.
This is more clinical though. From our counselor background, when you think about that was more for the moms. When you think about kids that are listening to this that are going off to college and their mental health and wellness,
Yes.
is there a suggestion you have for a kid listening that can help keep them balanced and managed heading off to school?
That is a really great question and a really important one. So I think that my advice would be similar, like kind of like similar to what I just said, but tailored to a young person,
Student, yep,
which is that there are going to be ups and downs.
no doubt.
And that is normal and expected and okay. I remember doing a semester abroad.
Mhm.
I will never forget standing in the post office in a foreign country, because at that time we did not have cell phones or social media, trying to mail a letter home. And I was in tears and nobody would help me. And yet, those 3 or 4 months were like the most amazing experience. But not because they were easy, but because I like saw and learned and grew and did. And so, what I would say to students is that there's going to be ups and downs.
Mm,
You're gonna learn a lot about yourself,
mhm,
that you can do it,
mhm.
and also, there's so much support and
Oh
help
my
out
gosh.
there, right? I think that it's pretty amazing to I think there's so much going on at these schools. I think there's so many people like you and like me, and it's really okay to want or to need help, and
Mhm.
everybody else doesn't have it as together as you think they do.
I think that's really, really well said. I'm really hoping my, young adults are listening to your words because I think that I would further that by saying, I can't tell you how many kiddos I've worked with that go off to school with maybe no anxiety or
Yeah.
very little anxiety, and they come back with some challenges because growth is hard.
Yeah.
I think the challenge can be, high for some kids.
Yeah.
But what you just said makes so much sense and is so important. They need to realize there are people
Yeah.
out there that
Yeah.
can help, that can support.
In all different
Yeah,
ways, right? Whether that's
totally.
social, academic, like health, mental health, like there really are resources and supports.
Yeah. I mean, I think kids have to just be
Yeah.
willing to ask, be willing and realize too. I mean, if you don't believe us, look it up on Google. Statistically, there's a lot of kids out there struggling,
Yeah.
and like you said,
Yeah.
homesickness is to me is pretty natural thing that most kids will encounter.
Yeah.
But I love what you said within your comments is you're gonna do this. You're gonna get through this and you're gonna grow as a result.
And you know what? Sorry, like, and if the school isn't, like, I always tell kids too, like, and if it's not working for you,
Hmm.
that's okay.
Absolutely.
Let's figure out what will. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, sometimes we have to go and try things, and sometimes, like, we need to change our roommate, and sometimes we need to change our school, and
Yep.
sometimes we need to change our major, and sometimes we need to change, like, our path, right? And so, like, we can deal with anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I transferred when I was in school, and
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that I did. It brought me to UConn, and when I was at UConn, I met my mentor there, one of
Uh-huh.
my mentors there, that allowed me to open up the whole world of counseling. So I
Well,
mean,
so I know you're
if it
probably
weren't for
trying to
that,
I know you're trying to wrap up, but that's
yeah,
another
it's
thing
okay.
too, right? Is that I think, kids try, like, I think we do this to kids, that they feel like they have to know their path, right? And that and they have to have it figured out. I don't know why we need to have kids applying to majors these days. Like, I feel like,
Right. A little
like,
crazy.
some of these kids, like, how do you know at 7? You don't know things
Right.
until you try and do things. So there's this pressure to know and to be sure. And, like, we can't know things. All we can do is make one decision at a time.
Right.
And so I think if we as parents and as professionals and as a culture can try to take the pressure off, that, like, you have to know and figure everything out and just trust that sort of like one thing will lead to another. And it may not be the path you thought.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it's a more meaningful path, or maybe it's a more satisfying one.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's funny when kids come into my office at 17 and they'll go out of their way to tell me, "I'm majoring in neurosurgery." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's cool." You know, um, all right, but, like, you're gonna
And some
probably
and some people know. I mean, somehow, I knew I wanted to be a
yeah,
psychology major, and I don't know how I knew. I didn't know
yeah,
what it meant to be a psychologist, but, like, it worked out for me.
yeah.
It doesn't always, and that's okay too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, let's face it, when kids are in college, they're pursuing something that they're gonna do for the next 40 years.
Yeah,
So to me, it seems like probably a decision we should take our time
I
making,
think so.
you know?
Think so.
It's some of my listeners might be wondering too, because I often, Emily, at the end of interviews will ask to have you nominate a friend, a coworker, or relative to keep the conversation moving forward.
Okay.
I wanna let everyone know Emily and I have chatted offline. She's made some amazing recommendations that I do intend to follow up on. So I appreciate all of the
Welcome.
suggestions you made. And just want to thank you for your time and your perspective. It's been really wonderful connecting
Thank
and
you. I
chatting with you.
agree. I
Yeah,
somehow had a feeling we would have lots to talk about,
absolutely.
and maybe we can continue the conversation
I
someday.
would love that. I would love that. Emily, thanks again. You have yourself a
Sure.
wonderful evening. You take care. Thanks. Bye bye.
That's all for this episode of Normalize It Forward. May this conversation serve as a reminder that you are never alone in facing your mental health struggles. There are always people who can help. To dive even deeper into our journey of normalizing one of the biggest issues young people face, check out more episodes of the show at youareheard.com. It's UAREHEARD.com. Continue gaining access to the right tools, the best resources, and the most insightful advice to achieve positivity, mindfulness, and genuine happiness.